everybody. My name is David Scher. I am the State Director for Congresswoman Balint. I manage her Vermont office, and we are so grateful to be here today. I will say very briefly on behalf of the staff, this is one of our favorite events of the year. The work is extraordinary. We're so grateful to the students, the artists, and of course, all of those who support the students and artists, so thank you. We do have a few acknowledgments we want to make today because this is a big event that we could not put on without a lot of help. First and foremost, the Vermont Arts Council, in particular to Susan Evans McClure and Troy Hickman for your support throughout the planning and execution of the event. The Arts Council has been the state's primary provider of arts funding, advocacy, and information since 1965. The council is committed to building a Vermont where art, culture, and creativity are at the heart of our communities. Engagement with the arts transforms lives, connects people more deeply to each other, energizes the economy, and sustains the vibrant cultural landscape that makes Vermont such a great place to live. Thank you also to the Wolf Kahn Foundation, in particular Ellen McCullough Lovell and Mara Williams. The Wolf Kahn Foundation preserves and promotes the artistic legacy of Wolf Kahn, who lived and worked in West Brattleboro and New York City. Known for his landscapes, he used color and shapes to convey contrast and drama. He was a great supporter of younger artists and would have wanted to encourage the students here today. A big thank you to the Chandler Center for the Arts right here for providing this incredible space to our students and for all that you do for our arts communities. Thank you to our judges, who you'll hear more from in a minute. Oh, yes, please. Thank you to our judges, Rebby Carlton, Jess Wilkinson, and Phil Goldenschweiger. Thank you for taking the time to work with our team to review all this artwork and for being here today. We greatly appreciate your perspective and all you do for our communities. And of course, once again, we thank you for all that you have done to continue to support the Congressional Arts Competition, the teachers, the students, the families, and we appreciate the big time commitment it takes on all of your parts to get here today. And I will add a special thank you to Morgan Nichols on the Congresswoman's staff, who really leads this whole event. So thank you to Morgan, who's right there. One final thing before I turn it over to Congresswoman Balint. We are going to have a brief 15-minute question and answer session where you can ask the Congresswoman whatever you might be interested in. So after the award ceremony, we'll have a few minutes to do that. So be thinking of anything you may want to ask her. She looks.
It does not need to be art related.
It does not need to be art related. Whatever you might be interested in, she'll be happy to chat with you. So without any further ado, here is Congresswoman Becca Balint.
As David said, this really is one of our most favorite days of the year. As you can imagine, when you're in politics, there are a lot of really hard days. But coming together to celebrate art and to be with all of you students and your families is really meaningful for us. I'm a former teacher, and I always incorporated a lot of art into my classroom, both visual arts and the performing arts. And that's because art was a through line in my life as a child and into my teens and my 20s. And my daughter now, who is 15, she is an incredible artist. And seeing her capacity for creation is something that gives me new hope every time when I come home to Vermont from DC. I could fly home every weekend, and to see what she's creating, to see the walls of her room covered in art continues to fill my cup. So I was very fortunate to grow up in a house in which I was taught at a young age that the arts were important. And it's about imagination, it's about seeing possibility, it's about finding ways to not feel stuck and to be able to create anew, even when you're at a place in your life where you're feeling small or confined or restricted or just not feeling like there's a lot of hope and joy in your life. Art is an incredible outlet. And my mother in particular, she conveyed to us at such a young age that there's always time to make art, there's always time to create, and that the process of doing that often opens your mind up to other ways of seeing. And I think sometimes when we are faced with really big political challenges, unfortunately, arts education is often at the top of the list of programs that people look to cut. And I think it is a terrible decision to make, not just because it's an incredible outlet for students who need it, especially students who may not excel in other areas, who express themselves the best through art, but also because we limit our imagination, we limit our way of thinking when we cut off funding to the arts. It's not extra, it is part of who we are as human beings. It's what gives our life meaning. And so I was very curious a few weeks ago. I am always trying to find ways to connect with people who have different political views than I have. And so I ended up doing a deep dive on what is the universal experiences that people have in the United States about what gives their lives meaning. And I don't think you'll be surprised to hear at the very top, it's family and personal connections. Our children, our parents, our grandparents, and the close connections we have in our community. But the other things that were the things, those essential things that give life meaning, of course, spirituality, connection to something larger than yourself, but also the arts, whether it's performing arts, whether it's visual arts. And so one of the things that I want to say to all of the students here, whether you decide to go on to study art seriously, continue to have art as a touchstone in your life. I continue to do that. In Congress, my time is, as you can imagine, it's very, very limited, the time that I have for pursuing creativity. But I still find time to play my musical instruments. I still have time to think broadly about how to bring creativity into my work. And so I hope for all of you, whether you intend to pursue it as your work, your vocation, your avocation, that you will continue to use it as a way to rejuvenate yourself. Because I can tell you right now, when we are in a time of so much political rancor and distrust, art can bring people back together. And so I want to thank all of you also for taking a risk. Submitting your artwork into a competition is not easy. You are putting yourself out there for other people to judge your work. That's not easy to do. So you have shown incredible courage and bravery by being willing to show your art. And I know your parents and your teachers are here because they are so proud of you that you are willing to do that. So my simple message is, keep creating art. Keep bringing joy and hope and other ways of thinking to the world. It will move us to a better place. So thank you again, and I can't wait for the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Balint, for those really amazing and supportive words about the important role of the arts in all of our lives. I'm Susan Evans-McClure. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Arts Council. A big thank you to the Congresswoman, her team, and all of you, the incredible students who shared their artwork with us through this process. I'm honored this morning to be announcing some of our winners. I'll be announcing the county winners, the thematic winner, and the People's Choice winner. So what we're going to ask is that everyone please wait in their seats until I've announced the county, thematic, and People's Choice, and then we'll invite you all up on stage together. And we'll do a group photo. And now, how fun. Okay. And now, our county winners. First up, Addison County, Lola Rollins from Virgins Union High School for .5. In Bennington County, Will Seo of Burr and Burton Academy for Host Father. In Caledonia County, Jenna Thomas of Linden Institute for Papa's Garden. In Chittenden County, Jacqueline Whittier of Champlain Valley Union High School for Hideaway. In Franklin County, Ryan Whitehead of Enosburg Falls Union High School for A Moment of Joy. In Lamoille County, Adam Lewis of Stowe High School for Hat Day. In Orange County, Caroline Watts of Thetford Academy for Sick Day. In Orleans County, Morgan Breitenbach of Lake Region Union High School for Flower Garden. In Rutland County, Carmen Ducato of Stafford Technical Center for Fighting for Survival. In Washington County, Knives Dreyfus of U32 High School for Just Dance. In Windham County, Jada Wood of Leland and Gray Union High School for Cards. In Windsor County, Jonah Libbins Mavadonis of Hartford High School for Lost in the Deceptively Small Keys. All right, so a big hand for all of our county winners. And just 2 more winners to go before we invite you all up here. The first is our thematic winner, who was speaking to this year's theme of Moments of Joy. And that is Eva Fuel of Champlain Valley Union High School for Little Moments. And now, I've always wanted to say this. Morgan, the envelope, please. Thank you. This is our People's Choice winner, is Clark for a seat at the table. Congratulations, everyone. And now we'd like to invite all of the winners that I just announced up to the stage to receive your certificates.
stay seated for right now.
Who's introducing?
David, were you going to introduce the judges?
Yes.
She already did.
I already did.
It's okay. Just let everyone know that. We're not going to do introductions for the judges. Okay.
We're now going to turn it over to the judges for the final announcements of the last awards.
Say a few words. All right. Well, we're going to start with me, and I'm Phil Godenschweger, and my choice was Nico Stornoff. And I don't know if we're going to have the slide up here or not, but I picked him because it was one of the few examples of the whole show of pure painting without any subject matter, and it's a very difficult thing to do and something you don't see in young people. So it was exquisitely handled. It was very expressive from the inside and out, and it's something that is kind of a personal discussion with yourself when you're painting, because you're putting material on the canvas and it's coming straight from inside. And I thought he did a very good job. It was an outstanding piece, and size has nothing to do with art. So it was a very small piece, but it was exquisitely done. And congratulations, Nico.
So, when asked what criteria I would apply to my selection, my response was execution and emotional impact. Form and content. The same criteria I apply to all authentic art I view. I was delighted to see how skillfully and effectively you all met that artistic and expressive goal. Watching young people mature as artists has been my lifelong passion. I teach art pre-K through grade 6 here in Randolph. I was engaged and impressed by the composition and content of the piece I selected, from the skillful use of painting and collage to the powerful contemporary content. I was blown away by A Spot at the Table by Clark from Champlain Union High School. Congratulations to you and to your inspirational art teachers, Jason Farron, Emily Mitchell, and Tim Duvaney.
And Emily McQuaid.
Sorry.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jess Wilkinson, and I run the White River Craft Center here in Randolph as well. It was a very difficult task looking at all of this artwork and having to make a selection. When I walked into the room, though, with all of the pieces being hung, I immediately was drawn to the piece by Sage Windorf. I spotted Touch Me Not. And it, similar to Phil's piece, it's a smaller piece, and it really felt like such a gem. It just captured a moment in time and was so expertly painted and communicated that moment. And yeah, congratulations, and thank you so much for including me.
Yes. So those winners should come on up.
This was hard. It was an inspirational honor for all of us to see the diverse and skillful art submitted to this year's Congressional Art Exhibit. You highlighted your artistic talent and individual stories through so many media. Printing, painting, collage, photography, digital media, and drawing. It was a drawing that caught our eyes as we walked into the gallery and kept us transfixed there for the next 2 hours. This piece was done with extraordinary draftsmanship and told a compelling story of coming of age and awakening.
Okay, so the 2025 grand prize winner is Jinyi Cassie Pan, Awakening Through New Eyes.
There you go, congratulations. Amazing masterpiece.
Do you want to do a group photo with the judges?
We're gonna do, okay, we'll
We'll do a photo with the Congresswoman. And Mara and Susan. One more hand for all the artists, please.
Well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate all the effort that went into this and amazing work by everybody. So we are piloting, as I mentioned earlier, a new feature of the art competition this year, which is to ask the Congresswoman some questions. So we'll open it up to a question and answer. We will make sure to project when you ask your questions. We can repeat it from up here if folks can't hear. Be respectful of other folks who may have questions. Keep your questions to a reasonable length so everybody has a chance. And with that, hopefully you've been thinking of some, and I'm going to turn it over to the Congresswoman.
And it doesn't actually even, I always say AMA, ask me anything, but it also can be a comment that you want to make, something that I should be thinking about as I continue my work in Congress, as I continue to represent all of Vermont and all of the young people across the state. So don't feel like you have to have a perfectly formed question. If you have something that you want me to know that you're thinking about, please feel free to do that. Who will be the first brave soul?
I'll go down into the audience too. Just
Okay, great. Yes.
First, thank you for representing our space so well. Thank you. How has your identity as a Vermonter helped or impacted your work in politics?
I really appreciate that. The question was, how has my identity as a Vermonter helped or hurt my work? Or am I phrasing it right? Help and impact the work that I do. I think that Vermont at its best is a state of neighbors, and we think carefully about each other, and we try to look beyond political identity to find a sense of community with each other. And one of the things that I bring with me into Congress, both in the work that I do in my Democratic caucus, but also what I do when I'm in bipartisan meetings, is to try to find those places of connection that we all have in common. People care deeply about their communities, whether they live in Kentucky or Indiana or Vermont. And I think representing a rural state has helped me to build connections to folks in other districts that may have a different political makeup, because I can say to them, rural is rural, whether it's in Kentucky or whether it's in Vermont. You're worried about your small hospitals, you're worried about your small schools and making sure everybody has what they need. And I see each person as a potential friend. That's just how I see the world. And a lot of people ask me, how do I do my work in Congress in a time when there seems to be so much anger at each other? And I have a mantra that I say, so something that I say over and over when I'm in conflict with somebody in committee, and that is, just like me. Just like me, that person has a family back home. Just like me, they ran for office because they wanted to do something better for their community. And that helps me in the rough times. And a lot of people will say, you know, how can you stand to do this work? And they thank me. And I always say, I don't have to do this work. I get to do this work. It is the honor of my life to represent this state, and I'm constantly trying to get better at it by listening deeply to what people want me to bring back to DC as the stories of their lives. So that was a really good question. Thank you. Okay, yeah.
For my civics and economics final, we're doing a debate. How do you feel going into debates with other people politically?
Great question. I hate debates. And I'll tell you why. At their best, right, when we're truly in communication with other people, the goal is to share ideas. It is to put forward ideas. You give me your ideas. Let's see where we overlap. Let's see where actually we're in conflict. But I feel like the 24-hour news cycle right now is driving conflict and a kind of debate that actually isn't about ideas. It's about getting other people to shut up. It's about beating people down. And so debate at its best is about listening deeply, and it is about responding to the message that people are trying to convey underneath. And so one thing that I learned pretty early on in politics was to bring my sense of listening deeply that I had to cultivate as a teacher into my work in politics. When I am going into a debate, I'm always thinking about my values first. My values, what is it that Vermonters value, that you start from a place of value and what brings us together as human beings, and then get into the nitty-gritty of trying to, quote unquote, win the debate. I think if you start from a place of values, you're always going to be much more true to yourself, and you're going to be able to talk about big ideas without it feeling like the goal is to shut each other down. Great question. These are really good questions. So I just got to tell you a quick story. So yesterday I was interviewed by 5- and 6-year-olds in DC. It was a group of moms who were advocating on the Hill, and they brought their kids with them, and I stepped off the stage, and these young people had their fake microphones, and the very first question I got, which could be anything, and this little kid says to me, "What do you think about the Cybertruck?" That was the most important thing. That's what they wanted to know. So this is great. So I think I saw one here and one over here. Yes?
You've spoken a lot about education today. What are you personally doing to ensure that funding continues flowing to Vermont schools from the federal government?
Yeah. So we are fighting a I don't like to use war metaphors, but we're in trench warfare right now, trying to protect so much of the federal budget that is supporting schools, supporting those who are most vulnerable. And I don't serve on the Education Committee, so just to sort of give you a top line, you serve on usually 2 committees in Congress, and I serve on the Judiciary Committee, and I serve on the Budget Committee, which is looking at the whole budget. So right now, one of the most important battles that we're having is around this budget that has been put forward that will call for $880 billion of cuts to Medicaid, which is a program that supports people's health care, and $230 billion of cuts to food programs. And you might ask yourself, how does that connect to education? Well, we know if students do not have, and their families do not have the health care that they need, that they are not coming to school feeling prepared to learn, and that's true with the food assistance as well. And so one of our jobs in Congress is figuring out, from the committee that I sit on, how do I do the battle that I have in front of me in that committee to impact what's happening in the Education Committee. So right now for me, this week, I was in a budget committee, once again, making the case to my colleagues that right now is not the time to be having cuts to Medicaid and food assistance when schools have still not recovered from the pandemic, when students have still not recovered from the isolation of the pandemic. And 2 of my main things that I focus on right now, specifically in regard to Vermont, is building more housing. But the second one is the mental health crisis right now, which of course also touches on education. So I will say to you right now that in answering the question about debate, if we start from our values and what we believe as Vermonters, we believe that everyone should have a fair shot. We believe that regardless of your zip code in Vermont, you should have a good school and a good community that's thriving. And so I try to take that with me to Washington, D.C. and translate it into, as I said, it's kind of trench warfare in committee to continue to make the case that some of these proposed cuts are absolutely going to be detrimental to our communities, our schools, and our students. So I take that work very seriously. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I want to know what you think can be done to increase bipartisanship, like at the congressional level, but also just at the community level.
Yeah, so it has to start from finding what actually connects us, always. And so people ask me what drives me. I have 2 through lines that drive me, 2 guideposts. One is I love people. I'm insatiably curious about people and what drives them. And the other is that I'm constantly trying to alleviate suffering in all its forms. And so I could take an hour talking with you right now about all the things that I think about this issue. But there is a climate scientist named Katharine Hayhoe, who is also an evangelical Christian. And she has been crossing lines her entire career because she is always working in spaces and political spaces where people within her own evangelical community don't necessarily support the work that she is doing on climate. And so one of the things that she says is, you can't talk about the politics, you can't talk about the policy until you find the thing that you have in common, that speaks to who you are as people. And oftentimes it's family, it's community, it is having a better life for your kids or your grandkids. Those are universal experiences here in this country. And so she says, if you try to jump ahead to talking about policy or politics with somebody that you know you're in conflict with on that level, you're not going to get very far. There has to be some trust established. So one of the things that I do is I participate in bipartisan meetings and caucuses. I also play on the bipartisan women's softball team. And as a gay woman, it's a little on brand, but getting up early in the morning and being on the ball field with Republican women, and we are not talking about politics. We're talking about the game. We're talking about supporting each other as a team, and we build that relationship. And I also have been quietly having coffee dates with Republicans in their offices without the cameras, without the people around, and just saying, tell me who you are. I take those opportunities whenever I can, and we have to get back to understanding that because we disagree on politics, we are not enemies. We can be political opponents, but we have spent too much time in the last decade drawing these lines between each other, and we have to get back to figuring out what is that shared sense of connection that we have in common. But I think about this in every waking moment when I am not in committee or on the floor, because it is a critically important thing. The last thing that I would say, just so that you understand also how I'm thinking about this, the architecture of Congress creates division, okay? When I was in the state Senate, we all, Democrats, Republicans, independents, progressives, everybody used the same coat room. Everybody used the same offices. Everybody used the same rooms that had computers in it. It was not divided by party. But in Congress, when you go into your committee room, you literally enter through the Democratic door. Your cloakroom off the House of Representatives has 2 cloakrooms on the side, so places to hang your coat, places to get a snack. They're completely divided. And if you go into the Republican cloakroom, they're playing Fox News. If you go into the Democratic one, they're playing CNN or MSNBC. So the architecture itself is creating division. And I can't imagine that is good for us as Americans. Great question. I think we're going to go over here. Is that right, Carolyn? Okay.
How have you, are you, or could you advocate for the LGBTQ youth in Vermont?
How are you advocating for LGBTQ youth in Vermont?
Yeah, so I am a pretty outspoken champion for the LGBTQ community. I am one of a handful of women in Congress who are part of that community. Right now in the House, we have 12 members that identify, 12 members out of 435 that identify as being part of the LGBTQ community. And I have to kind of walk a tightrope because I want people within the LGBTQ community and their families to know that I see them, I value them. On some level, I understand their experience, while also reassuring Vermonters broadly that I am there to represent everyone. And I have been such a strong advocate for mental health programs for the LGBT community, looking across the globe. How are we supporting the health of our community globally? And this administration, unfortunately, is incredibly hostile to our community and has shown it in every possible way. And that is not, it's really not a partisan perspective I'm having here. You can look objectively where they're cutting the money. And so it is important in this moment for me to be a fierce advocate for all humans, for all people. Every single Vermonter, regardless of identity, should be treated not just with respect and dignity, but to have their rights protected. And every single person should have access to the health care that they need and deserve. So This is incredibly important to me, and my team is also my boots on the ground here in Vermont, making sure we were continuing that work. Yes.
What do you think about the unethical and unlawful deportation of Gregor Garcia?
Yeah, I gave a very impassioned speech on the floor of the House about another young man who was taken away. Unfortunately, Abrego Garcia is not the only one. We have more closer to home, Mosa Madawi here in Vermont, who for the time being is out of jail on bail. We have forgotten that if we violate due process for anyone, that is a violation of due process for all of us. Because if it can happen to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, if it can happen to Mosa Madawi, if it can happen to anyone regardless of status, we are all at risk of losing our due process. I think it is immoral and inhumane what is happening right now, that people are not being told the charges against them, that in many cases they are being taken by masked people in unmarked cars and not being allowed to see their families and their attorneys. And I wrote to our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, about the ways in which his actions are violating our Constitution and federal law. I gave a very big rally last week about Mosa Madawi, and many of my colleagues came out for it, and we were grateful to see the judge here in Vermont letting him out on bail. But I think a lot of Americans don't understand that the Constitution does not just guarantee due process to American citizens. The Constitution is clear. Anyone living in the United States, regardless of status, is afforded due process. And when we lose sight of that, we are literally losing track of the ideals that make us Americans. And I have been very fierce and focused on this issue in the Judiciary Committee in particular, because some of my colleagues are playing fast and loose with what it is that the Constitution says, and that should frighten all of us. The Constitution, the framework by which we organize ourselves, is what gives us the right to say that we are exceptional in the world, not because of who we are, but because of the structures that we've set up to make sure that everybody has those rights. So you're gonna hear a lot more from me, because this goes to the heart of who we are as Americans, and I find it chilling, absolutely chilling. Thank you for the question.
So thank you for giving this opportunity. I have more of a comment than a question.
Sure.
I just wanted to say thank you for your support of youth mental health and lifting up that topic in general, and ask that you continue to look for ways to support youth by holding social media companies accountable.
Yeah.
And looking at legislation to regulate and force the companies to create safe products. They're violating all kinds of laws right now, but we need to repeal Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which allows them to put profits over
Yeah.
people. So I'm just hoping every chance I get, I'll mention that, and hope we can continue to look at that.
Absolutely, and I agree. I agree, and here is an instance where we need willing partners on the other side of the aisle to do that work. But I, as a parent myself, I'm very much focused on these issues. We haven't talked at all about the billionaires who were sitting behind the president at the inauguration, but many of them have a stake in making a lot of money off of our youth through social media, and that deeply troubles me, it should trouble all of us. But yes, that is work we have to do. I think I saw another hand over there. Yes.
There has been a growing concern from the public about AI-generated content, not only it being a threat to artists, but along with that, also it being used as a tool for misinformation.
Yes.
I'm wondering your thoughts on that.
Oh gosh, we talk about this all the time. All the time. And the technology is so far ahead of our own knowledge on this issue, right? So just to sort of break it all down for you, right? The thing that sets us apart in this country too is our elected officials are, for the most part, just the regular people who decided to run for office. We don't necessarily have expertise on artificial intelligence, right? So within our caucus, we gravitate to those people who know more about this. And I will just give you the name of one person who I look to all the time. His name is Ted Lieu. He represents a district in California, and he's very focused on these issues. We don't even have a real understanding of the technology itself because it has improved so rapidly in the last few years. I do worry about the ways in which AI could impact artistic endeavors, but I do not believe AI will replace artists because there is a quality of the work that is presented when it is not generated through AI. And I actually think there's going to be an incredible renaissance in this country around art, really seeing the ways in which we can use AI as a basic tool and framework, but in terms of the quality of the work, especially when it comes to visual art, I don't think that it will replace the visual artists in this room. But we also have to make sure that we have really strict guidelines for our artistic property, our intellectual property. And I worry quite a bit about that. But I'm curious, it's such an interesting question that you asked. What are your concerns around it as it relates to the arts?
I'm concerned that companies will not see that. I also agree that it will never replace the heart that artists bring, but I'm concerned that large corporations will not care about the heart that goes into this art, that they'll only see AI as not a tool, but as something to make easy money.
Yeah. Well, yes, I love that how you bottom line it at the end there. Yes, often it is about money making. One of the bipartisan groups that I participate in is a group of Republicans and Democrats who sit and work regularly, probably every quarterly, and we sit down with filmmakers in Hollywood. They come to us in DC to talk about how AI is changing their work and how they make sure that artists and performers are still being compensated for their work, while also understanding that AI can be used to do some of the scut work, the grunt work in cleaning up a film that used to take them hours and hours and hours before, and they can do it in a matter of days. And so they are thinking carefully, how do we implement it in, as you said, in ethical ways? So really, these are incredible questions.
Let's do one.
One more question, and if you don't worry about the questions, guys, please think about it at our office. You can call us or visit our website. But just one last question.
So, because they know they have to both come at me from both sides, because I know I'll just stay here for hours, because that's what I love to do, yes.
What are your thoughts on how America's political movement has impacted climate change?
Can you say it one more time?
What are your thoughts on how America's political division has impacted climate change?
So something very strange happened in the last 20 years. It was not considered a controversial view that we had global warming happening, that we had industries that were having an impact on the climate and also on the weather. And somewhere along the way, the Republican Party had decided that we no longer had common agreement on the science. And it's not just showing up in climate, though it absolutely is showing up there. It's also showing up in science broadly. And I think many of you know this administration has gone after a lot of research that's happening right now in this country, not just on climate, but on all kinds of health problems that we confront. And I'm looking for that next Republican champion who can say the horrible storms that happen in Florida and in North Carolina, the wildfires in California, it is to our detriment if we don't acknowledge that that climate change is real. It needs to come from the conservative movement, understanding this is actually a conservative ideal. If you believe in trying to save money and resources and spending it on the right things, then of course you would support the science that shows us how to be more careful with the resources that we have. But it's gotten to the point right now that this has become a buzzword to kind of tune people out. But it wasn't like this always, which is why I bring up the name Katharine Hayhoe, who is this fantastic climate scientist who's constantly trying to talk across difference. And there are certain issues that in the past 20 years have become associated with one party or another, as opposed to saying climate change is real, we need science to attack it. We can have disagreements about how to approach it, what those programs should look like, where we should spend the money. But the fact that we're disagreeing on the science is very troubling to me. And to my point earlier when we were talking about debates, that I need a champion on the Republican side right now to say this isn't up for debate. This is real, it's impacting my constituents, it's impacting yours, regardless of whether you're a quote unquote blue state or red state, it's impacting you. So let's get beyond that and let's get to solving the problems. But it comes from all of us, and this is actually a great place to end before we move on to the next thing, which is it takes all of us to demand that of our elected officials. That if they're not hearing from us, if those Republican members are not hearing from those members within their community saying, get beyond this partisan rancor and realize my home is underwater in North Carolina in the same way those houses are underwater in Vermont when our streams flood. And it comes from being willing to be brave, to be courageous, to maybe be the only one that's saying that, and trusting that other people eventually will see that there's a space for them to say it too. I wish I had another hour. Thank you so much for these questions.
Again, thank you all so much for being here and for coming out to celebrate with us today. We do have a few final announcements here. I'll just take a quick minute. First, I did want to note the biographies for the judges are all in the little handbooks that you got, the little programs rather that you got when you came in. Please look at those. These folks are wonderful examples of ways that you can live a life in the arts, be engaged in the arts throughout your life, if that is something you're interested in, or if it's just things you want to be engaged in, and I'm sure they'd be happy to chat with you if you want as well. So thanks again to our judges. In a minute, we'd like to memorialize the day with a big group photo, so all the teachers and students, please come up on stage. Before we do that, teachers and designated portfolio folks, the artwork has been taken down and put into your school's portfolios. Our team is ready to help you collect that in the gallery right after the photo. If you are a student who received an award this year, we've actually held those out of the portfolios because we would love to display them in our Vermont office and in our DC office. But if you would like to take them, that is totally fine. We will make sure those get back into your hands. And finally, if anybody is available at 1 o'clock, we'll be hosting a community conversation with the Congresswoman right here in this space for members of the arts and humanities communities. So you're all welcome to join. If you had previously signed up to participate in the tour of the White River Craft Center, we have pivoted. We're not doing that. We're doing the community conversation. So join us if you'd like. And that's it. Thank you so much. Group photo on stage. Come